Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We're very, very privileged today to have with us Mr. Douglas McGregor. And this is a real man of honor, peace, and heart and soul, and somebody that really knows what's going on in the military because the guy's been there. He's been at the top. And he has insights and observations of what's going on in Ukraine that you don't hear anywhere else. So thank you very much for being with us today.
Sure,
And
happy to be here.
and there's of course, the Ukraine war, the cover of our magazine, the Trends Journal, back on February 22nd, 2022, 2 days before the Russia invasion. The cover read, "COVID war to Ukraine war to World War." And as I see it, World War III has already begun. And this isn't a proxy war. If I said to you, listen, give me some guns and a hand grenade, I want to blow the guy's brains out next door, and you gave them to me, you're an accessory to the crime. And to me, what's going on here is America, NATO, and its allies are at war with Russia, as clear as can be. And this is going to continue to escalate unless it stops. And the media has it as though, the Russians are losing. They never mention that they control over 20% of the territory that they didn't have before they invaded, and make it very clear we're both opposed to the war. We're just giving the people the facts of what's going on. And morons and imbeciles, when you give them the facts that they don't know and they don't like, they call you a Putin puppet, So, and then the other thing is that after the United States, after the Ukraine and/or the United States, the UK, or whoever blew up the Crimea bridge and the Nord Stream pipelines, Putin said, okay, we're going to ramp it up now. And that's where it's at now. And they've destroyed the numbers that I see, and you know better than I do because you know a lot what's going on the ground. About 70% of Ukraine's power and water infrastructure have been destroyed. So how can this keep going on and keep more weapons keep going in there when it's a losing battle?
Well, it's going to go on until it can't. And I think it's going to reach that point when the Russians ultimately launch their offensive. I think by the time the Russians that have positioned now, certainly at least 650,000, probably close to 700,000 troops all the way around Ukraine, when the striking power of that force, which will be 300,000 roughly that goes in, I think the place will collapse. And the reason is very clear. The losses the Ukrainians have taken are just frightful. The conditions under which they have been fighting are incomprehensible. I mean, this man, Celente, has thrown away human life in Ukraine on a scale that Stalin and Hitler achieved during World War II. This is not a sensible, pragmatic individual by any stretch of the imagination. And I guess as long as Celente continues to receive cash and equipment, he will continue to force the issue. And, let's face it, at this point, Ukraine is, for all intents and purposes, the 51st state. We own it. We pay for the government. We pay for the armed forces. We equip it. These are the facts. Now, where are the Ukrainians at this point? They've lost an estimated 157,000 dead. And when I say that, people are shocked. Oh, that can't be, because nobody in the mainstream media tells you the truth. We confirmed some time ago about 122,000 dead. This is through newspapers and various sources on the ground and comments from people that are in the war, observers from the outside. But then we also discovered something that the Ukrainian government admitted to, and that is 35,000 missing in action and presumed dead. When you add that to the number, you're at 157,000 dead. The hospitals are full to the brim. They're bursting with wounded, terribly wounded people. And as we were talking earlier, the report that came in this morning from a Ukrainian source on Telegram talks about the numbers of Ukrainian soldiers, wounded soldiers, dying in the cold because they do not have adequate clothing and they can't evacuate them. And they can't evacuate much of anybody at this point because Zelensky has given them this Hitlerian order, which is to hold every inch of ground instead of allowing these people to withdraw to new defensive lines. So this is a disaster. It's a catastrophe. The Russians are not losing. They're poised to put an end to this, and it's not going to be attractive. And the biggest mistake we can make at this stage of the game is to intervene in this thing just as it's ending on the assumption that somehow or another we can turn back the clock. We can't. And we certainly don't want to risk direct confrontation with Russia. If we do, then the danger of the nuclear confrontation, it goes through the roof.
Well, you mentioned the danger of a nuclear confrontation. They've been selling this, by the way, and we've been warning about this now for several months. And for instance, Business Insider a few weeks ago, this is the headline. You ready for this? A nuclear attack would most likely target one of these 6 U.S. cities. And they say a nuclear attack on the U.S. soil would likely target New York, Chicago, Houston, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C. But the Federal Emergency Management Agency has an emergency strategy. FEMA has some simple advice. Get inside, and stay tuned. You know, what am I, 6 years old? Simple advice to simpletons. Who are you talking to? You're going to be dust. Life's not going to be worth living.
I thought they were going to tell us all to move to Cancun or something. Look, we don't even want to consider this. The Russians have made it very clear that unless they are attacked with a nuclear weapon, they will not use nuclear weapons. They don't need to. They're ultimately dominating the battlefield. For instance, every single day, the Russians fire upwards of almost 60,000 artillery rounds from all the artillery systems, rockets, shells, and so forth. The Ukrainians can only fire roughly 6,000 back at them. Now stop and think about that. I'm a soldier. I have been under artillery fire. I've driven in my tank through artillery fire, including air burst as well as ground burst. And 60,000 rounds is beyond my comprehension. That's like living under a rain of steel, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Unless you can silence the enemy systems, all you can do is withdraw. And instead of withdrawing, which would be the intelligent thing, they're leaving their soldiers there to die in great numbers. This is horrible, and we're responsible for this, Gerald. We did everything we could to bring on this war. This is not something that was created in Putin's mind. And the Russians have no interest in conquering Eastern Europe. That's all nonsense. They've been there. They've done that. That was a mistake. They got out, and they don't want to go back. And we're trying to extend this indefinitely. And the only thing that will result is the complete destruction of Ukraine.
You ready for this? This is the headline from Reuters. Putin ally Medvedev warns NATO of nuclear war if Russia defeated in Ukraine. And they go on to say the former president, Medvedev, an ally of Kremlin chief Vladimir Putin. This is how they use propaganda. An ally of Kremlin chief warned the North Atlantic Treaty Organization on Thursday, today, that the defeat of Ukraine could trigger a nuclear war. Now, wait a minute. It says that he warns NATO of nuclear war if Russia is defeated in Ukraine. Then he goes on to, this is quote, the defeat of a nuclear power in a conventional war may trigger a nuclear war. Wait a minute. He warned that it would be a nuclear war. Again, pure propaganda. He goes on to say nuclear powers have never lost major conflicts on which their fate depends. Nuclear powers have never lost major conflicts on which their fate depends. That's all he said. And that this can continue to escalate. But they keep putting it out here. But what I'm saying to you is that they are promoting nuclear war. And in the sense that I believe that the United States is going to ramp up, where we're going to become involved in this, because there's going to be a false flag event or a nuclear exchange. So let's go to The Russians sent a missile into Poland and 2 people died. Remember that one?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
A total
Listen,
lie. But my God, 2 people died. Oh, did you see the numbers came out? 600,000 Tigrians were killed in the Ethiopian War, started by the clown that was after he won the Nobel Peace Prize. How about the 377,000 Yemenis that, according to the United Nations, have been killed? Half of them, according to the United Nations, children under the age of 6 years old. Oh, but 2 people in Poland were killed by the Russians. Let's unite. That's what I'm concerned about.
no, listen, that's legitimate. And you know as well as I do that if we go back through American history, it's not difficult to discover that in 1965, we claim that there was an incident in the Gulf of Tonkin when there was none. And before anybody could say investigate, we had effectively declared war, and Johnson began committing troops to Vietnam. We always have this problem with the truth when it comes to the outbreak of warfare. So I think you're right. I think we have every reason to be concerned. The good news is this, and this is going to sound strange to some of your listeners. The Russians are not fools. They do understand what nuclear war means. They have no interest in it. I don't think the majority of people in Washington have any interest in it. But the concern has always been the same thing. Once it becomes abundantly clear that Ukraine is crushed and Russian forces are advancing across that country, will we risk a direct confrontation on the conventional level with the Russians, for which we're completely unprepared? We can't even recruit for the United States Armed Forces at this point. We only have 457,000 men in the United States Army. Of that number, you have perhaps 120, 130,000 that are actually combat troops. All the services are in bad shape thanks to 20 years of stupid wars, also based on a series of lies that we don't need to go into. So now I think it is a real danger once this becomes clear that someone in the White House will say, oh gosh, we have to do something. We can't just sit here. We have to do something. Well, something is not an answer. Something is not a strategy. We've never had a strategy. We've never had a strategy for any of this. We said, well, we're going to punish the Russians. And then they made the mistake of assuming because the Russians went in initially in the hopes of just inducing negotiations that they were weak and stupid. Now the Russians are giving them what they don't want. Total war in Ukraine. War, war, war. We don't understand it. We haven't fought in it for decades. And we need to stay out of it because this war is unlike anything we have seen since World War II.
And again, you see what's going on, how NATO keeps that little clown boy, Stoltenberg, just yesterday, more weapons, more weapons, more weapons. The UK just came out today that we're going to keep sending more weapons, more weapons, more weapons. And you mentioned about the Gulf of Tonkin, that lying little lowlife McNamara lied, that arrogant guy, about it happening. And again, what the hell are we doing in the Gulf of Tonkin? What if the Vietnamese were in the Gulf of Mexico?
Exactly.
You know, I'm an American. I believe in the founding fathers like George Washington. You read his farewell address. Do not become involved in any foreign entanglements, particularly what's going on in Europe. This stuff has been going on for centuries between these people. Exactly. We're not going to solve them, and they're not our problems. And when you're talking about the Ukraine border dispute, what is this going on for 300 years? They're taking down the statue of Catherine the Great. Oh, Catherine the Great, Odessa, 1750. I mean, it's been going on back and forth. And like you said, Russia's made no threat to invade the rest of Europe. And then you have this clown boy playing the prime minister or whatever over there in Lithuania, or Latvia rather. Latvia's president has urged Western countries to step up military support for Ukraine. He's at the Davos conference. Yeah. And you're seeing at the Davos conference from Zelensky's wife to one clown after another, pumping up more war.
Well, everybody's emoting. Nobody is thinking. And that's the first problem. And the second problem is that they harbor delusions. And what are these delusions? Well, number one, that we are all powerful, that we are invincible, that nothing bad can happen to us. Today, there were also comments in the New York Times about, well, the Biden administration is warming to